Welcome back. As we close this self-leadership series, I want to step back for a moment and look at the journey we have taken together. We began by acknowledging that leadership feels heavier than it used to. We explored emotional regulation under pressure. We examined self-sabotage and accountability. We spoke about sustainable energy and the cost of constant exhaustion. If you notice, there's a thread running through all of it. Reflection. Not performance, not strategy, not even productivity. Reflection. Because without reflection, leadership becomes automatic. And automatic leadership, especially in high-pressure environments, can quietly erode you. Let me explain what I mean through my own experience. I spent over 3 decades working in operations, high-intensity environments, fast decision cycles, constant movement. Incidents did not wait. Situations demanded immediate action. You assessed, calculated, responded, moved on. There was no time to sit and think deeply about why you were responding in a certain way. You simply acted. Over time, that way of working becomes more than a skill. It becomes a habit. And eventually, it becomes your default operating system. My mind became efficient, calculative, sharp, reactive. And I thought that was strength. When something happened, I would respond instantly. When pressure rose, I would tighten focus and act. When decisions were needed, I delivered them quickly. It was admired. It was effective. It was what the role demanded. But what I did not realize was that my body and mind had become robotic. Reactive rather than reflective. There is a difference between being decisive and being automatic. And I did not see that difference until something happened around 3 years ago that forced me to stop. It was a work situation that shook me just enough to ask a deeper question. What am I doing? Why am I doing it this way? Who am I becoming in the process? For the first time in a long time, I did not want to respond. I wanted to understand. That phase was uncomfortable. When you have lived in action mode for decades, slowing down feels unfamiliar, even unsettling. I did not have a structured method to reflect. I only had questions. And then something very simple happened. I was shopping, not in a bookstore, not in a self-development aisle, in a clothes store. And near the checkout was a small journal, colorful, simple, probably designed for teenagers. I picked it up out of curiosity. There was nothing strategic about it. It was almost random. I bought it. At first, writing felt awkward. What do you even put on a blank page when you are used to operating through meetings and reports? My thoughts felt scattered. I was impatient with myself. I was used to outcomes, not process. But I kept writing. Slowly, it shifted from something I was trying to do into something I needed to do. It became a routine, then a habit. Not dramatic, just consistent. It required discipline. And what it did for me was transformational. For the first time in years, I was not reacting in real time. I was examining in quiet time. I began to notice patterns, the situations that triggered frustration, the conversations I avoided because they felt inconvenient, the pace I was maintaining that looked strong on the outside but was exhausting on the inside. Journaling did something no performance review ever did. It showed me myself. Not the title, not the achievements, not the reputation. The person behind the responses. I realized how automatic I had become. How many of my reactions were simply habits formed under pressure. How often I acted before I fully processed. And that awareness changed my leadership more than any external training program ever could. When you write consistently, something subtle happens. Your thoughts slow down, your decisions become more deliberate. You begin to separate urgency from importance. You respond more intentionally because you have already processed privately. That is self-leadership. Throughout this series, we have talked about emotional regulation, accountability, sustainable energy, all of those require awareness, and awareness requires space. Most professionals do not lack intelligence, they lack structured reflection. We live in a culture of constant input, messages, notifications, data, meetings. There is very little quiet examination of how we are thinking. When you journal, you create that examination. You ask yourself questions you would otherwise avoid. Was my response aligned with my values? Am I leading from intention or habit? Is my pace sustainable? What am I tolerating that needs addressing? These questions are powerful because they are private first. You're not performing for anyone. You're not defending yourself. You are simply observing. Over time, observation becomes clarity. Clarity becomes confidence. Confidence becomes steadiness. And steadiness changes how others experience you. Your team does not need you to be robotic. They need you to be regulated. They do not need constant speed. They need consistency. Journaling helped me move from reactive efficiency to intentional leadership. It helped me recognize that strength is not about how fast you respond. It is about how consciously you respond. And that shift reduced exhaustion. It sharpened decision making. It improved my communication. It aligned my actions with my values. Not overnight, gradually. That is why I see journaling not as a hobby, not as something reserved for creativity or adolescence, but as a leadership discipline. It is a thinking tool. It is an emotional processing tool. It is an accountability tool. It is a mirror. As we close this self-leadership series, I want you to consider something honestly. When was the last time you examined how you're leading? Not in your head while rushing between tasks, but in stillness. If leadership feels heavier, it may not be because the world is harder. It may be because you have not given yourself space to process it. In our next series, we're going to explore journaling properly. Not vaguely, not romantically, practically. How to journal for decision clarity. How to journal for emotional regulation. How to journal for accountability. How to journal in a way that fits into a demanding professional life. Because self-leadership is not built in dramatic moments, it is built in small, consistent acts of reflection. And that reflection transforms leadership. If this series has resonated with you, stay with me for the next chapter. We are moving from awareness into structure. Because powerful leadership in 2026 will not belong to the fastest responders, it will belong to the most intentional thinkers. And intentional thinking begins on the blank page. Stay tuned for the next video, and I shall see you soon. Have an inspirited day. Bye.